Did.
Oh.
I'm muted.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Let's Debate. I'm Let's Farm, and this is my co-host Sparrow, and Perpetually Annoyed, and Sweet Pea, and we will be your moderators for this debate. Our topic tonight is the most severe punishment warranted for the police involved in Tyre Nichols' death? And this promises to be an excellent debate. We have P. Barnes arguing that the severe punishment is warranted, and on the other side we have Elijah Rivera bringing the opposition. We will be having up to a 10-minute opening per side, 45 minutes of open dialogue, and a short closing statement followed by audience questions. Remember to tag the moderators or Let's Debate with your questions for our debaters. Please remember to hit that thumbs up if you like the show, and don't forget to subscribe for more great content. Little reminder to attack the argument and not the debaters or each other. Now, since you are not here to listen to me ramble on, let's get to the show. P. Barnes will be going first. The mic is all yours.
Thanks so much, Let's Farm, and thank you to the rest of the moderators and the hosts here for the to do the debate. February the 7th, 29-year-old Tyre Nichols was driving home when he was pulled over by members of Memphis's elite Scorpion unit. The reason for the stop was reckless driving. That reasoning has now been largely disputed, but let's face it, given the on-the-spot punishment that Nichols received, what he's accused of now is largely irrelevant. The first we see of the incident is body cam footage of Officer Preston. So of course, as simultaneously iterated this request while violently assisting Nichols to comply with it. As police drag Nichols out of the car, Nichols can be heard in a far calmer voice than should be expected, saying, all right, stop, okay, and proclaims his innocence a number of times. The officers responded with yelled threats of violence. For example, one officer stated that if Nichols didn't get down on the ground, the same ground that Nichols was in the process of getting down on, he would break him. When you look at best practice policing for situations where adrenaline is high, and the police did create a high adrenaline situation, a single officer is generally recommended to yell one voice, and they assume the role of giving all verbal commands for the incident. When you contrast it with this case, 3 officers screamed more than 20 commands laced with violent threats, and often shouted over each other, as Officer Hempel holds a taser to Nichols' leg. Nichols at this point was being held down by 3 officers. One let go of Nichols to deploy pepper spray, which hit Nichols and a second officer. So now it's 2 officers don't have any hold over him. And the only person with hands on at this point is Hempel, who has an open palm on his back and a taser in his other hands. Nichols now makes the decision to remove himself from what no reasonable person could suggest is not an existential threat to his life. Hempels deploys his taser. The prongs appear to stick into Nichols' jumper, which he removes, and he begins to leg it down Ross Road. Hempel canters after him in pursuit, and after an extremely impressive 30 seconds of physical activity and audibly out of breath, Hempel turns heel back to the traffic stop, reports that a taser had been deployed, and remarks to a colleague when he arrives back at the traffic stop that he hopes they stomp him. The footage now shifts to 2 separate body cam recordings and also local CCT footage. One officer tackles Nichols to the ground, a second assists in holding him down. Nichols now attempts to alert his mother, who is less than 20 meters away at this point at her home, which was his destination on the evening. One officer holds Nichols' arm while 2 others start to punch him in the head. Nichols then receives his second dose of pepper spray. Now, I don't recommend that anyone watch this footage again if you don't have to. I didn't like it particularly watching through it, but this second dose of pepper spray is probably the most harrowing part to witness. The officer that deploys the pepper spray has to kindly request that his colleagues stop repeatedly punching Nichols to the head so that he can actually give that second dose of pepper spray. At this point, another officer who is standing away from the beating now moves in and lands the first of two kicks to the head of the now fully restrained Nichols. Nichols can now only barely mumble a barely audible "all right," which is the same compliant language he'd been using since the start of the incident. As two officers that were holding Nichols to the ground now lift him up, another officer deploys his extendable baton and hits Nichols to the body 3 times. With his hands behind his back, unable to defend himself whatsoever, Nichols has punched another at least 5 times to the head. Nichols falls to the ground. He's kicked to the head again. He's kicked to the side again. He's now handcuffed. His lifeless body's dragged and propped up against an unmarked police car. No one uses their first aid training to try to render any sort of assistance, and the police officers walk away as EMT arrive. The officers now have a debriefing session. One of the officers can be heard gloating that he was hitting him with straight haymakers. Another officer laughs as she rhetorically asks if the suspect was running. And what happens now is a seemingly hurried backward and forward questioning as to whether they found the weapon, as to whether there were any drugs or anything found on him, whether anything was found in the 500 meters that Nichols ran from his car towards his mother's house. The answer to all of these questions is no. He had no weapons. He had no contraband. There was nothing found in the car. There was nothing found on the road. Instead of assisting EMT with reviving Nichols, officers can be seen looking around with flashlights, seemingly hoping that there's some sort of physical evidence that would justify the fatal beating they had just inflicted. 16 minutes after EMT arrive, Nichols slumps to his side. One of the EMT bothers to open a medical bag. Nichols is taken to St. Francis Hospital. 3 days later, after never regaining consciousness, Nichols was dead. An independent autopsy report, paid for by Nichols' family, found the cause of death to be excessive bleeding as a result of a severe beating. Tadarius Bain, Demetrius Haley, Emmett Martin III, Desmond Mills Jr., and Justin Smith have all been accused of second-degree murder, aggravated assault, aggravated kidnapping, and 2 counts each of official misconduct. These officers need to receive the highest sentencing possible for the crimes that they've alleged to have committed, not just due to the heinous nature of the beating they inflicted while pretending to be police officers, but to show some form of willingness for justice reform within America. If this case isn't the catalyst for some sort of police reform, then I fear that never of desensitization to these sort of instances of this nature, and criminologists have been speaking on this issue for decades now. And before people start to say, but P-Barbs, the officers were black themselves, how can this be racially motivated? Systemic racism is not and has never been the suggestion that all cops are racist. It's the observable, well understood racial disparity of outcomes in the US justice system. It ranges from the seemingly benign, the fact that black drivers are less likely to be pulled over at night when their skin color can't be identified, to the more egregious, like this, like George Floyd, like Breonna Taylor, right? And the litany of other cases that I can cite of unarmed people being pulled over for meaningless crimes and end up losing their life because of it. The way that conservatives have moaned about fentanyl levels in bloodstreams and people used to work together, so it had some other meaning behind the attack. BLM riots burning down cities that seem to still be standing despite being burnt down, and criminal histories of people makes them complicit in this tragedy. Calls to demilitarize police forces and put funding into improving community programs have been ignored, and Tyre Nichols has paid the price for that inaction. The sentencing, as I said, in this case, needs to at least reflect some sort of willingness to change in the US system. And look, in closing, let my voice sing in unison with those over there protesting about this at the moment. No justice, no peace. And I'll see the rest of my time.
All right, thank you very much for that opening statement, Barnes. And we now turn to Elijah for his opening. Take it away, Elijah. The mic is yours.
Thanks. Well, I it could be argued for third degree since this is a very reckless unit, the Scorpion unit. They did get appraisal for ringing in a lot of the harsh, violent crime in their local municipality, and so they did a good job in that area, but they didn't do a good job here. And I think they definitely were not the police unit that should have been used for a typical driving. I didn't hear about that, but yeah, it's definitely not the proper unit for something like that. They're mostly were appointed in very high crime neighborhoods, and I don't know if he was in a high crime neighborhood. I'm pretty sure he's just like outside of one. So maybe they were the local officers to take the call. But I think we're going to agree more than disagree here. Yeah, second degree does seem more justified, but see, to them, they think being brutal is going to solve the issue, and it doesn't happen. Like, you can't just be brutal towards a person, expect them to behave properly. But he could have just in defense, he could have just you know took the first original beating when they pulled him out of the car, not beating, but they could have took him. He could have just complained about the arrest afterwards, and he could have sued for police brutality because Washington Post cited a nice article. It was like March 9th, 2022, that a lot of people sue for police brutality. It's like 1.5 billion, and that hurts taxpayers. So I think we're going to really focus more on the cause of why this happened and it not being too racially motivated, but more government motivated. That's my argument on that side. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot of good arguments for second degree. I can't lie, like it does look like a very severe punishment for second degree. But I mean, that's really the majority root of my argument, though. So we can get into it. That'll be it.
All right. Thank you for your opening, Elijah. We will now move into the open dialogue. You guys will have 45 minutes to cross-examine each other. Let's get at it.
So I do think the Scorpion unit is a wasteful unit in total because it's just expanding the police budget. And I see it here in New York. You can expand the police budget as much as you like, but violent crime still is going up through the roof. So it's not doing any significant changes. So I think the best solution is honestly to have more market oriented forces. You could even look in the past. You had the history of policing, which I was going to go through one of your sources. I think it was your source was where was this guy? It was let me just find it real quick. It was the guy right below. It's like Alexander something. The color, not the color of law, but uh, how policing is in America. I think he was kind of insinuating that that's the history of police in America. That it was always racially motivated. I disagree there. The police kind of started when sheriffs were in local towns in the colonies. It was like in the early mid to late 1600s, and those guys, it was just regular police force. They wouldn't even do patrols either. They just did local call-ins, right? So if somebody had a problem, they'd go to that sheriff and say, "Hey, someone stole my tools. Someone stole my boots. Or someone stole my money or whatever," and they'd complain, and the police would do their job after the crime took place. So you see a lot more crime in heavily zoning law regulated areas. So there's high regulations and not enough freedom or market activity for a community. You're going to have crime.
Can we just go? Sorry to cut you off. Can we just go through these one topic at a time?
Yeah, sure.
Okay,
sure.
awesome. So
yeah, I don't want to
yeah, of course. Let's just let's break it apart and let's talk about each topic individually, right? So you're talking about the origins of policing in the US. Do you not think that in the South, the slave oh god, I can't remember the name that they used to call them, but the slave patrols, you don't think that has? And I mean, when you look at those groups and even the sheriffs that you're talking about, what generally happened is that it would be local white males that would be deputized into these systems, right? So these systems, from their very inception, a lot of them, part of their purpose was to protect white people's property, which were black men in these days.
Yeah, but you didn't have that problem in Asia. If you just cross-reference it, you didn't have that problem in Egypt either, when they still had a police force that was similar but not the exact same. And the thing with the issue of policing in the U.S. is because after after a lot of I guess redlining laws, right? The HOLA or HOLC, it's the what's it called? Homeowners Loan Corporation. They created what areas can have prosperity or not, or get certain loans. And I think that caused most of the issues for blacks to just look towards the black market, for the black community to look to the black market, which is not a good market because you have more risks. You have other mafia members who used to work with even the police back in the day. You had a famous mafia member named I forgot his name. His last name is Rothstein, and he tutored um, Carlo. He tutored two famous mafia members. You can look them up, and they didn't help any community. They only helped their own little communities. So
Mhm.
I think the issue is not that it's just police system in America where its foundation is. It's just um, the economy, right? That's why I sent you that IMF paper because you see a lot of crime go down as prosperity goes up.
Well, I mean, the article that you shared with me, and look, we can share it with the audience so that they can see it. The that article was related to Central America. At the start of that article, it cites the drop in crime to be due to increased security in those countries. And look, let's face it, the same like policing programs in America, the war on drugs, which we know is targeted towards Black Americans. It's that same program that caused the crime within Central America. It feels like fixing the systemic problems within a lot of systems within the US would alleviate a lot of that crime faster within Central America. And the article that you shared, it shows a causation, and it doesn't actually state as to whether it's unclear in that article that you shared, and I couldn't actually find a source for the data either. It shows a correlation between crime rates and growth and economic growth, but it doesn't say which one is driving the other. And the only thing that it states is that they believe that increased security has caused the drop in crime, and that has allowed an increase in economic prosperity. And I would contend that, look, you're half right. I agree in the sense that it does have to do with economic factors. I certainly don't think opening up markets is going to assist it. I think that would make the problem worse. The main driver of crime is income inequality, right? It's not, you can't, yes, a
That's the
rising
economic
tide,
base.
a rising tide lifts all boats, right? But by increasing capitalism, right, by increasing the mechanisms by which sectors of the community are allowed to have a larger proportion of their labor taken from them and a little bit given back in capital, right? You're only inflaming the systems that are causing this in the first place, right? What you need is community programs. There was in 2017, I can't remember the local jurisdiction it was, but it's in one of my links. Instead of 911 calls going straight to straight to police dispatch, what they did is they rerouted some of those calls through to community members who they had provided training in conflict resolution, in a little bit of medical expertise, and also who understood these local areas. They routed 25,000 calls through to this particular area, and only 250 of those calls ended up needing to have some form of police respond. So that's not an economic thing, right? Can
But
you
that's
sort of
starting in the
tie?
middle. That's not looking at the cause. It's kind of just saying, look, here's an effect, and here's how we're going to try and solve the effect instead of go to the root cause. I think the root cause is not that it's racially motivated or that it has to deal with police system itself, because police systems only acted this way after they can just get away with certain crimes. They can kind of get away with bullying, people on the street just because they know they're going to get saved by a lawyer, the union lawyer, pretty much. And I think those are the issues. You have government unions and all these expansive programs that are for police and doing damage at the same time towards the community that's trying to be policed. It's not good. I don't think expanding government's going to help. And when you said it was capitalism as its fault, I disagree there because I sent you another article where you have Iceland, you have Sweden.
That was a
Netherlands.
that was a prospectus from a company that sells investment funds. Yes, I read that one as well.
Yeah, and I think that's important because you want to invest in a community that's safe and effective. And I don't think having all these zoning laws, which pretty much does damage to the community itself, you're telling people they can't do whatever they want on their land of property. Those zoning laws are going to just make the community stagnate, while the other community that does not have zoning laws are just going to keep going up. It's almost like a relay race where if you like blacks had the baton and they're starting to slow down because of zoning laws and the government expansion policies and a lot of Ponzi schemes that they're on, like Social Security. It's set up like a Ponzi scheme, and they're not going to be prosperous. You're just going to have the community stagnating and turning to a black market. That's why you don't have these police crimes in areas like Singapore or the areas for the safe communities on the Global Peace Index. I think that's what it was. It was based off the Global Peace Index. Those 11 countries.
Do those countries that you provided also have proportionally much lower income inequality, right?
Yeah, because they don't have an inheritance tax. Their property taxes are lower. Their corporate income tax is lower. Some don't even have a capital gains tax. Capital gains tax is also lower. So the community is able to keep more wealth. And if you have
but there was also in, sorry to cut you off, but also in these communities, unlike America, there weren't systems originally in place to deliberately hamper someone's, like you're talking about inherited wealth, right? You're talking about generational wealth, right? Which proportionally, white people in America, I think the latest study I saw on it, your average white person in America starts in a family with around $100,000 worth of collective value on average, right? That's the median. The black person starts with 35,000.
Okay.
Right.
Yep.
I don't have that either. Don't worry. Right. But what I'm saying is these are the averages that we look at. Right. So we know that there is a generational wealth problem. We know that black people in America don't start off with the same footing. Right. But this is a side topic to what we're talking about. Right. I agree with you that that income inequality is definitely a driver of crime. We know that's a driver of crime, but the problem is the way that those statistics have been used historically, right? What has been done in the past is you go, this area has a higher rate of crime, so how do we fix that? We give them a bigger stick. We put more funding into it. We use the military surplus that we have to arm police to the teeth, right? And yeah, I agree. I agree to a certain extent that, look, police do get away with a lot more than your average person does. They need to be given certain powers to do their job. But to say that they're continuing to get away with this sort of stuff is I don't agree. And I think that we need to look to more social programs rather than I still, like you mentioned, zoning laws, right? I fail to see, so I live in an impoverished area, right? I started off with low generational wealth. People around me are engaging in criminal activities, and to survive, I might need to engage in those criminal activities as well. How does rezoning where my house is, how does that fix the problem?
Well, here's the fix the problem is if your community had more access to income, which is having more job opportunity and having more local wealth, and let's say you have more jobs created in your area. Let's say I don't know where you live, but let's say you wanted to have some local farms created instead of a little garden or a kindergarten playhouse or whatever's there. You could have more wealth with food instead of worrying about if you're going to send your child to walk along this garden or go to school somewhere. I think it's more beneficial if you get rid of the regulations causing income inequality. Rothstein, the guy in the first introduction, Rothstein did an interview with the people at Reason. And I can link that interview if you like, but he did an interview where he said government was the main cause of the problems that you have with the black community having so much income inequality. And he mentioned zoning laws, and this is this is one of the guys that wrote this is the guy that wrote The Color of Law, right? And he goes into details in his book a little bit. I had to read only a little bit of his book because I couldn't read the whole thing, unfortunately. But I was familiar with the interview that he did with Reason, and I thought you would like that, so I'll try and put that somewhere. Here's the interview. But he blamed government, not race, as the main cause. And I don't think just throwing money at a community is going to solve the issue, because we tried that with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, and who got affected mostly? It was the black community and poor Hispanic community got affected. My great grandmother got affected by that.
Yeah, I agree. When you mainly look to capitalism to fix problems, it invariably makes them worse. I agree.
That's
right?
not capitalism.
When you prop up when you put band-aids
You know,
when you put band-aids on a broken system, right, it's only a band-aid. And I hate to say it, that's what I'm hearing now. You're saying I'll give people more money, which yes,
I don't want to give.
it will yeah, well, you want to give them the tools to generate more of their own income. So
Give them
rather than
skills and
actually
assets, right?
yeah,
Skills and assets.
so rather than looking at what caused the problem, what we're doing is this is just more band-aids by giving people more capital. It's like, hey, here's our system that you don't seem to be doing well at because we designed the system that way. Here's here's extra skills so that you can plug those gaps. I don't see how, like, in what concerns me, Rivers, is nothing that you've mentioned apart from. I'm interested to hear what you were saying about the actual reform within police, which I mean, the simplest, and I hate to bring it to such simple terms, is the easiest way to stop police from killing unarmed black men is for police to stop killing unarmed black men, right? That seems to be just the basic root of the problem here, right? And that's a systemic problem, which is shown in this case, right? All of these officers were black men at the same time, right? And Tyre Nichols has received the same disproportionate outcome because of the US justice system, right? So I'm interested to hear in what reforms you'd make
Sure,
to
but the
police.
U.S. justice system's not creating Scorpion units. I mean, yes, they're definitely militarizing the police more. But that's just not happening at exponential rate that I think it is. But the thing is, like, if you have a police, the reason crime exists is only because of poverty. Like, a lot of evidence points to that. I know you may disagree there, but it's not because just a bunch of, white people woke up one day and said, we're going to start being racist. That's not the case. It was government that had a huge hand in it. And it's not capitalism's fault because the areas I mentioned don't have these police problems. They don't have Singapore police beating up on the Japanese that live in Singapore. It's just not happening.
Singapore has capital punishment within its legal system.
Yeah,
I mean, yes, there's less violent. I'm sorry to cut you off. I mean, yes, there's less violent crime, but as I said before, the reason that Singapore and other areas have better outcomes within their justice system is because they have low income inequality, not
but
lower
that's
income.
market
They
oriented.
have
That's
lower
not
income inequality.
Right. But that's economy oriented. That's not hasn't have nothing to do with police system over in Singapore.
It has
They
to
have a
do
low
with the police
income
system.
inequalities because they can't get enough goods and services in their local community. They have to import it, which is what we're doing in the U.S. We have huge trade deficits. So we're just importing everything from China, and a lot of the smaller communities are not able to get those goods because they're so high priced now with inflation.
Mm-hmm.
And inflation caused by printing money, not supply shocks or wages going up.
The economy interacts with policing and with this issue in the US because it's the economy that is core, the economy and also the justice system, right? The historic justice system within the US has created the income inequality that creates areas and communities of high crime. And the way that the US are combating that high level of crime is to build bigger sticks, right? Is to over.
That's not the solution. We agree that that's not the solution, though. You can't just expand the police system for that. The solution is to, reduce the certain crimes or the laws, reduce the certain laws that are causing the crime. That's the only reason the police are there. They're to enforce the law. So if you get rid of some of these regulations and laws, you're not going to have as much crime. And most crime is theft. It's not violent crime either. The only reason there's a lot of violent crimes because people who are in certain communities have to join gangs. They have to join groups that don't have their best interests and are only working within a mafia like pyramid, and that's just not going to solve the issue.
Yeah, and that's used.
I want to ask you, what do you think the main cause is? Because I say the main cause is the government regulations, and it's not market oriented. Like, I don't see the Mises Institute or even people from the Chicago School saying, "Oh, we have to just expand the police force." Like, I think their main solutions are to expand the market, like in those areas, in those 11 areas that have very small regulations. They don't even have zoning laws in most of those areas. You could just do whatever you could do on your own plot of land there.
Right. So the question is, what I think the root cause of what the unarmed black people being killed by police, what I think the root cause is. Is that what the question is?
No, what's the root cause of the income inequality? Because that's the root. That's what we both said. The income part is why crime is going up. If they don't have the income, then
Yeah.
you're going to turn to crime, and that makes sense. We saw that in Weimar Germany. We saw that even in the Bolshevik Revolution when they had economic crisis. A lot of them turned to crime. Although the Bolsheviks, well, the USSR, the government was doing most of the crime anyways there. So,
Yeah.
but
Look,
yeah,
what I think the root cause
root
is the
cause.
way that these systems have been set up in the first place. Firstly, there is, I mean, I don't think any of us can argue that some of the roots of the police force were from the south. A lot of their model has been modeled off the slave patrols in the south, right? And there's still that historical that's still those historical roots cannot be ignored today within the American policing system. And plus, the other thing is all of the systems that have been created to ensure that that Black Americans couldn't engage in the economic system and held them back, like you mentioned, redlining before, right? Segregation in and of itself. And plus now the state that you currently have in America, where any time that government, you've got entire generations that have been taught that if government uses money to help someone, that's communism, and communism is bad because I
Well, it's
say
not
it was
communism.
because they needed a well. You've never heard, like, you don't hear
It's
healthcare,
more.
like
It's more towards
healthcare's never been called, like, universal healthcare's never been called communism.
communism is total control. You mostly have a socialist approach or a social democrat approach. That's what the social democrats had their policy on before the Weimar hyperinflation. It was to have all these healthcare programs and all the government programs, not to have the
Right.
government micromanaging if someone goes to the store and what they can buy, and to have
You
ration
don't
meat,
think
ration food. But I think the what you're saying is the main cause is it's just the system. But I don't see the
I didn't
system
say it was
having a
just the
market
system.
oriented.
I
Well,
said
you said
it's
the
the
justice system, right?
I
Yeah,
said
I
it's
want
the
to
way
get
that the systems
specific,
have been
right?
used. It's the way that the systems have been set up, and the way that Black Americans have been treated historically within the economic system that America's chosen to champion around the world. Right? It's the fact that, as I said before, your average white family starts off on or your average white person born in America today will, on average, have a far better starting point than a Black American person. The way that that relates to the topic that we're talking about is because, as I said, that creates income inequality because they're at a lower starting point, right? And fiddling around with economic numbers, right? And fiddling around with zoning laws. I don't see that as a solution. All it's going to do is it's going to allow. I mean, yeah, those property values might go up. They may sell that property to someone else who already holds a substantial amount of that zone. They may end up working within a business that they just sold their home for. And what happens then? Do they buy another home? What happens to the housing market in those sorts of areas? Do you think someone who is now sitting on a commercial property, right? Both neighbors, let's say it's a residential area, right? You rezone it so it's industrial, right? Your neighbors sell up to some conglomeration, right? You now have an area that's zoned for industrial. I don't know, do zoning laws even allow people to still actually live within an industrial area,
Not
right?
anymore, not here.
Yeah, exactly. So what happens then?
But there's a ton of highway strips where you see a ton of land not being used, and that could be used for
You
new
want
housing.
people to move to
You know,
to the side of a highway?
well, I'm just saying there's solutions. Delge the highway strip into a more road-based area, but that's a nice solution to increase housing supply instead of just waiting for someone to pump money back into the housing market where you have all China and Larry Fink buying up assets and trying to sell them to high bidders. That's not going to help the black community. That's not going to help them at all. I
If
think what you're saying is it does sound more economic oriented. It sounds more on the economics side. It doesn't sound more like the police system just formed out of racism. Like throughout all the research that you've given me and I've done it myself, I haven't seen just a police system was set up solely to uh, do damage to minorities because
that's
blacks, but because you have other minorities that do well. You have Asians and Jews, but they didn't participate in politics until after they had more economic independency. There's a lot of good books on the I think it's Intellectuals and Race by Thomas Sowell, and he explains that very well. Why the black community is doing more is more left behind because of certain regulations. It's not because
Yeah,
of
look,
the police hate them. It's because they got left out in the market.
I've heard a lot of Thomas Sowell's work. Unfortunately, Thomas Sowell likes to equivocate equality of the two. I always forget the two. He always talks about
Outcome,
equality of outcome. But what's the other one? Help me with the other one. Equality of opportunity, right?
opportunity.
So Thomas Sowell often in the opinions that he gives on, like, he talks a lot about racial issues, even though his study is in economics, right? Although, yeah, the two are linked.
But they're not. Yeah, I'm going to say they're not like,
he equivocates equality of. He tries to pin on the left that the left wants equality of outcome, and that's what we're striving for, which isn't the case, because I think that equality of outcome is, I think it's a bit of a pipe dream, to be honest, but we could at least have equality of opportunity, which is what the left is talking about, and is what I'm suggesting would be one part, but still, right? So to give an analogy, right, what you're suggesting is that, yes, the cause of higher policing in certain areas in America is because of income inequality, and it's areas of low crime or areas of high crime that is driven by comparably lower incomes and lower wealth within certain areas, right? So that's the cause, right? What I'm saying is, how does any of this? Why aren't we focusing on the police forces?
because
Why are they? Why
just
is
a
this?
section of the government that enforces laws. So if you take away certain drug laws, you take away certain tax laws, the police don't really have much of a job, and it goes more back to the original system of policing in America, which was in the daytime you had an actual sheriff's department, but at nighttime you had a night watch, and that's not a nice piece of hidden history that doesn't get talked about. You had more local communities looking at their own communities to see if any crime is going on. That's a lot of history. It's in Wikipedia, so you can look at American police force. That's how it was back
Yeah,
in the day.
much like the system that I said was being used in that police in that local area, where instead of calls going directly through to police via 911 via 911, they would be rerouted to more community based, the people who have actual training in conflict resolution,
Yeah,
and
yeah, but you don't need to.
that
Mhm.
sort of substantial reduction in the number of police call outs. And unfortunately, that's what you have to do. You have to somehow figure out how to stop these police, and until all jurisdictions agree that you need some sort of reform within these systems that lead to disparaging outcomes. And we've been told why those disparate outcomes exist. You need to, first of all, stop the level of interaction between police and these sorts of communities, and you do that through social programs. But unfortunately, whenever these social programs are suggested within the US, they're knocked on the head. It's just Democrat cities wanting to increase crime.
Well, where I live in New York, we have more psychologists on the police force now than it's the past 40, 50 years. And it's not helping. I mean, crime's just going up. So I don't think continuing a failed policy is going to help.
Is crime
And
going up disproportionately than anywhere else
in
in
New
the
York,
world?
no, in New York, a lot of, as you said, the Democrat ran cities, crime is definitely going up a lot more. And that's comparable to other areas.
Is that
So,
because Democrats generally have areas of higher
no,
population?
but you don't need a police force to enforce your local laws. You could have a community, a local private community to do it. There's the Hell's Angels; those are over here in New York, and they stop a lot of crime as well as the police, sometimes to the same extent. And it's a local little community private force,
Yeah,
and I think that does a lot more good than just expanding the police budget or trying to get more psychologists. Not Hell's Angels. I'm sorry, I forgot the name of it.
yeah. I was going to say, man.
No, it's not
Look,
Hell's
I'm an
Angels.
Australian. I know about bikie gangs, all right? Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I forgot the name of the. It's not called Hell's. I'll find it for you later. I'll send
Oh,
it to you
good.
in Discord.
I thought, yeah,
But
you can't be talking about the Hells
no, no,
Angels.
yeah, but yeah, no. I think again, if it's income inequality and you want a more freedom of opportunity, the best opportunity you could achieve is having more market and freedom. You're not going to have to increase taxes and inflation. That's just going to bid up prices, and the poor communities, like the Black community, is just going to stay low. They're not going to be able to buy anything if their dollar isn't worth anything.
Right.
So
So
I think markets are
so-
better than just looking at the police force and saying you got to do better, or let's put a psychologist. Or there's one of your it was a Harvard paper that you sent me. It was like, okay, it's only culture is the main cause. I'm like, there's just no way it's only culture. It's impossible, because culture is very smallly correlated.
Right. That's an interesting claim. I still don't. So, but what I still don't understand about the arguments that you're making is, instead of it feels like, let me give you an analogy, right? You run some sort of business that requires toxic chemicals, right? And you get a leak of a toxic chemical that creates fumes within the building. Do you get what? You've got two solutions. You can either give everyone face masks, or you can fix the leak. Which would be the more which would be the better outcome? Because it feels like, because what you're saying is, right, so police are killing black men in disproportionately high levels compared to whites. They're pulled over more often, right? When you actually look at, they've done studies where you look at
At nighttime they pull someone over.
yeah, and at nighttime, black people aren't pulled over as often because they can't see the skin color, right?
Yeah.
So why are we focusing on, like, I think we agree that the economy at some state. I'm still yet to hear what you would propose doing about the policing, because there's obviously something wrong with it. But, like, let's start there. Do you think that there's something wrong with policing within the US?
Yep. The police force here just expands and nothing's happening. You just have more crime. So obviously, more policing is not going to help. But more private matters will help, because the local community knows their local community better. They know who the drug dealer is. They know who the arms dealer is. They know, like, where you should and should not go at past 3 a.m. The community knows the community knows the community better than some local district police office. And so your example of the gas leak happening, or some leak happening in a business, and what would I do? I would prevent that from happening in the first place, because you could look at was it John Baptist say, and it's what's the unseen. And if you didn't break the window, that money for investments could have went to someone else being hired. So if I was going to start some type of chemical business, I'd make sure that safety is priority number one. And if that's possible, profit it will come through. And we can see that in the Kuznets curve. Um, More countries that have more capital are just more safe environmentally and for their workforces as well. So capital seems to be the main issue and the main cause for increasing prosperity within a community.
Unions also have a lot to say about workplace health and safety, but we're moving on to a different topic.
We'll see about that. I'm gonna make a thing soon on unions. So
okay, I'm sure. So look, let's put a few test cases together, right? So, I mean, you did also make the other point that I wanted to touch on was you seem to. I found the words that you use, "taken the beating," to be quite interesting. So, I think that was the initial conversation that we started on the Discord, was around what I guess. What level of responsibility should Nichols take in what happened to him? Did you want to expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, I haven't seen a lot of research on, if you comply with the police, they're gonna just kill you either way. There's not too much research. I've tried looking for it. Maybe you could help me in my research, but there's like a couple cases. There was one case where some dude was in a hotel and the SWAT team came and he followed all the directions and shot him. That's still on YouTube, so it's kind of weird.
Yeah.
But there's not a lot of those cases, because you have the Washington Post reporting that, like, almost on a yearly basis, $1.5 billion gets the departments get sued per year, and that's a lot of money. And so I think you can make more money if you do follow or comply with the officers, and it's a wrongful arrest, right? Because Tyre Nichols, it looks like it might have been a wrongful arrest.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot more opportunity to get your money's worth if it is a wrongful arrest and they did abuse you. That's why the Washington Post they reported on that article.
Yeah,
I'll try
look,
to find
the amounts that they're sued, I mean, I'm sure that there's a lot of insurance companies that make a lot of money off that litigation, and I'm sure there's a lot of other parts of the legal system that make a lot of money out of departments being sued. I mean, it's not coming directly out of the funds. Yeah, their insurance premiums are going to their liability, public liability insurance is going to fluctuate based on the level of litigation that's taken against them, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't think any of these, like you can go through countless cases here, right? So Andre Hill from Columbus, Ohio, this was in 2020. He came out of the garage and was holding a cell phone. He was shot and died. Manuel Ellis, 33, in Tacoma, Washington. He was walking home from a convenience store. An officer slammed a car door into him, which knocked him down, right? He was much like Nichols's case. He was, but I just, yeah, I'm interested, like you said.
Well, did he run away? I'm not familiar with that one.
Why do you think that matters? Do you think that there's a point where
because you could definitely sue because he was pretty much getting his arm twisted and thrown to the ground. Like they
what use would money be? What use would money be to Tyre Nichols now?
No, it wouldn't be of use now. But if Tyre just sat there, got tased, maybe he probably would have came out and be like, "All right, I'm gonna sue the officers for I don't know." I had my mother worked on a lawsuit for divorce case, which is ridiculous, but it kind of ties into how much money you can get out of the government. You can get a lot of money, and there's millions of dollars worth of damages if it's done just to your body, even if it's just someone twisting your arm or whatever, or someone tasing you, like an officer tasing you accidentally or abuses his tasing. He's just tasing you because he thinks you're a threat, but you're not actually a threat. You're just complying. There's a lot of those cases locally that don't get reported. And I think you can sue a lot more if you just comply with the police in any necessary. If they say, hey, you have a cell phone, drop the cell phone, drop it, go down, hands behind your head, just comply. And if someone abuses you, if one of the cops abuses you, you're in for a lot of good money on the lawsuit. And,
based on the footage, Tyre Nichols was largely compliant.
He ran away. I would not, if I was in his shoes, I would not have ran. And I'll be like, okay,
I think it's
hard to abuse me. Go ahead.
I think it's hard to judge what we would do in those sorts of
situations.
It is hard because this comes down to psychology, right? Fight or flight is a very I have some level of social anxiety. I know too well that fight or flight is something that you cannot control as much as you want to talk yourself out of it. At a certain point, your body takes over. And I think that being 29 at the time, Tyre Nichols, I don't think would have been ignorant of what had happened to what happens to Black Americans in a lot of cases in the US. So I think he would have been well aware of the potential that I don't think the suggestion that, hey, just cop the beating, do nothing, and hope that you can sue afterwards.
I don't think it's not just like
it's like cases, man. Great. Why should people have to? Why should a person's life, right, and a person's health and safety, why should that have to be a bartering chip in the first place? Why should the protection of that? Why not just those who are inflicting that damage? When we know that there are better ways of doing things, we know that there are better ways of reducing crime in these communities. Why don't we just do those? It's like there's a problem with the legal system. So what do? We rely on the legal system to fix it.
No.
It's like you're letting the people. Well, you're suggesting that they sue, right? That they sue the government afterwards.
Well, yeah, if that gets known, like that you can have an easy lawsuit against an officer, I think a lot of police will definitely tame themselves because a lot of the public is not going to be like, oh, let's go pay $1 billion to this, this case. Yeah. They're not going to want to do that. So if we do normalize people being compliant with cops, then I think that's way better than just, having people just normally be anxiety and just running away. I think that's way better, to be honest, because a lot of cops also have this very, like chaser oriented mindset. Like I think there's a study out there that a lot of cops in the U.S. used to be former like athletes or like bullies or something, which is not a good sign that
Yeah.
that you have most of your police force is just random, kind of jockey guys from the
Mhm.
past. I think that's not good either. But what can you do? I mean, for that situation, the only best opportunity and solutions is to either reduce the law or make it normalized where you can just sue the heck out of the cops and by
Right.
complying.
Do you think that it would, like, let's say you're trying to instill this change in the community, right? So I'm like, do you think it would, in two of the things that you said just there, do you think it would be easier to change the mindset of the victim in these situations and teach the victim to just comply, take whatever beating you get? If you do get, but don't worry, if you do get beaten up, you can sue the government. Or do you think it would be easier to go into the police force and say, hey, maybe these people shouldn't be beaten up, or even a higher level of reform, right? Because you said, oh, police have a chasing mentality, right? They're not. It's not. They're not German shepherds, right? It's not.
Well, I'm sorry. Okay, I want to be specific.
Talking,
Yeah, in the very
you know what I
bad
mean?
areas, right? Like the Scorpion unit, they do have that mentality. Like you have these certain police units that are solely focused on extreme violent communities or local counties, then they're gonna be that type of way. They're gonna be very abusive, and that's exactly what we had with Tyre Nichols. This Scorpion unit was like very hard people, very hard cops were part of that unit.
Mhm.
And
And look, it
by the
has
way they
highlighted
talk,
some
by the way
problems.
they're just nonchalant about him getting beaten up. Like you can tell this was not their first rodeo doing this to somebody. They've done it probably a lot more times, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think there was complaints towards that unit. There was a couple complaints towards either the officers or the unit themselves.
That's right. But I mean, again, I could go through lists of people that have received the same disparate outcome, that have had the same outcome as Tyre Nichols. I
Well,
mean,
yeah, but I'm saying is,
Derek Chauvin was not a member of an elite police officer unit. He just
no,
choked a
but
guy.
Chauvin. Well, that's not a good.
He just choked a guy for using a fake $20 note. I
No,
mean,
but Chauvin's not a good example because he did get reported for being a very abusive cop. I think he even pointed a gun at some random person. He told he was kind of just being a douchebag about that. So
yeah, I've heard the story of the kid that shot
Yeah.
a Nerf gun at the police car,
Yeah,
and yeah, he pulled
pointed
a gun
out.
on him. Yeah, that's terrible. But a lot
Yeah,
of
that's what
cops
I'm
get
saying.
a
It's
lot
like
of
a lot
cops
of
get.
these cops, the ones we're talking about, those are the jerky type of cops. Like that's not the whole police force. But
Yeah, but this is
you
the
know,
same. This is the same thing, and this is why I said in
yeah,
my opening, right? This to me, this is just more of the same apologetics to
it's
deny
not
what is the
apologetic. I'd rather just reduce the police force and
it's
have
the
it more
bad apple.
community based. I want to expand. I don't want to expand their budgets more. I want to reduce it. You got to get rid of some of these districts because a lot of them are also not even next to the violent communities. They have to have like a 2 minute, 3 minute travel just to get near the violent communities. And if that's only the area that people are looking at, I think it's better to just increase their economic prosperity by having some of the criminals go and actually go towards the market and maybe try and sell whatever they're trying to sell instead of going to the black market and selling some type of drugs that are laced with, I don't know, fentanyl or something.
Mm-hmm. Or hey,
So
go a
I think
step further.
reducing the laws are a big step. I don't think it's just giving psychology courses to police officers or teaching them that you have to treat one community of color this way than the other. That's not going to help. It's just wasting taxpayer money and time.
But they
I think
already
reducing
don't
the law
treat
for
one.
sure.
But they already don't treat one community that way.
Well, there's
Largely,
courses. If you look
statistically,
at the courses in the police training courses now, you do have to act a certain way. I forgot. I think Project Veritas broke that, or some news agency broke that. There's this inner police force have to treat the black community this way, and others they can get away with. You could I'll send that to you too if you want, but it's
look,
it's just not going to help. Like I don't see that like just reforming the police is going to be the best option. I think reducing the incentive for crime is the better option.
I agree, and that comes from income inequality. That
Right,
comes
which
from
is economics, not
reducing that
police.
income inequality. But you can do that at the same time
Yeah.
as other community programs. And I think the biggest stumbling block to doing that is, as I said before, and look, I only use the commie label because I think we can agree that the word communism and socialism are quite often equivocated in the US because there's been a large proportions of the community that have been taught to just hear the word and be instantly disgusted. The problem that you have and the problem that you're going to face is that these community programs cost government money. And unfortunately, a lot of people see any time that government money is used to help communities, it's seen as, unless it's for fixing roads or putting up street signs, it's seen as socialism. It's seen as communism, and it's instantly, and it can be instantly derided.
I don't see expanding the police budget or programs helping my local community out at all. You got more homeless.
I wouldn't give it to the police at all.
What happened?
Don't give it. I wouldn't give this money to the police at all. Like
so you'd like to create like a separate, I guess, organization, like I don't know, what would it be called? Like
funded into community programs, right? Local organizations that can actually assist in these communities.
Like which specific policy would you do? That's what I'm saying. If you're just going to bid up the price for, I don't know, psychologists to be part of the local community, that's just going to bid up the price for getting a therapy session or whatever, you know what I mean?
Well, I mean, your medical system and the user pay system for, I mean, do you think that if there was a more universal healthcare system, hey, I'm in Australia, our healthcare system has some problems, but I can walk into a doctor for free, right? I may have to wait some time because it would be going to a center that bulk bills, right? If I go to the hospital, all I pay, if I end up in an ambulance and go to the hospital, all I pay is for the ambulance. Right.
That does nothing to help stop like a police brutality. That's what I'm saying. That's not.
Well, it puts more money in my pocket, which reduces my income. It reduces the level of income.
It puts more money in your insurance, pretty much. It doesn't. You're not going to use that money to spend it on, I don't know, some food.
This isn't an insurance. This isn't an insurance scheme, right? People who hold no medical insurance and pay nothing in medical insurance in Australia, we don't get medical insurance provided by our employers. If people that do have private health insurance pay for it themselves, if you don't have private health insurance, you can walk into a hospital and you can get treatment for free. You pay nothing.
Well, it's better if you have a doctor, teach how you can take care of yourself at home. Let's say you do stumble your toe on a nail at work or something. I don't know. You could treat yourself instead of going all the way to a doctor and paying a high price for it. I think that's way better. Like more market solutions are going to be. What was it? Rand Paul's father, yeah, one of them. They used to take care of the homeless for free, and that was before you had the Great Society Act and all these healthcare measures being put in federally and locally, because a lot of the local politicians just followed and expanded the same policy that was in place federally. You have more market solutions. I don't think just throwing money at something is just going to help. Like just that the 2008 crash was pretty much that. It was Fannie, Freddie Mae that got loans from the Treasury, and they pretty much had a moral hazard to just dump a bunch of bad assets on a bunch of poor people. I don't think what's the same. How are you going to do the same? Like it looks like the same exact policy for healthcare. Here's a healthcare plan. Here's what you can buy and do with it. Unfortunately, it costs a lot of money. So let's hope that it doesn't increase in price. All you're doing is shortening the supply of doctors and increasing the demand for healthcare. Like I don't see that's going to be very successful at all.
Demand for healthcare. Healthcare isn't a discretionary spend.
No, but it is in demand. It's not supply, right? People say, well, I want to go to the doctor, but there's only the supply of doctors don't count as an insurance policy.
Right, but doctors are there to provide healthcare.
Right, that's right. The main job. They don't have to go and make a contract with a certain company saying, okay, I can only provide these cares. They should be able to provide any care they feel like without even having to have a contract with the company. They could just be a sole provider. You could just say, hey, I'm going to subscribe $5 a month to this doctor's YouTube channel or something, and I'm going to learn how I can take care of my body. I think that's a better healthcare plan than just
allowing local people like doctors to serve their community and not having some sort of organized healthcare system that's really only there to keep workers able to work and provide their labor. That sounds terribly Marxist there, Ribs.
No, it's not Marxist. That's a doctor just providing his own contract. That has nothing to do with socialism or labor theory of value.
I'm only having a dig at you.
No, I know.
Look, are there any other? Because look, they were the main points that I wanted.
Oh, your thing. Them getting
training.
They got training. What was it? Memphis and I think, what was the other one? There's two of them that got training in Israel. I think that's bad. I think you should get police training from the IDF. Like
Yeah.
the Israelis do not have a good track record for human rights or.
Yeah, look, we could probably spend another hour talking on that subject,
Yeah.
and I know that you love getting into that sort of topic. But the head of the Mississippi Police Force received leadership. She received leadership training in Israel in a multinational program that was hosted in Israel. She denounced and said that she would never provide police officers training in 2018. All of these officers were hired after she had already denounced and said that she would no longer be supporting or using training from Israel from the IDF. So yeah, that's
right.
And,
no, I know. But I'm just saying,
Tennessee's never received that program.
We should definitely stop police getting their training from the IDF. The IDF does not have good credibility, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's pretty much it, really. I think my solution is more market oriented. I think you want to have more of just a social program, and we could try it. Maybe we can have like, you know, I'll try and get Long Island to do more market, and maybe maybe New York City can just throw some social programs.
I don't think you could stop. I don't think you could stop Long Island from doing capitalism anymore, could you?
We'll see. I think
I think we're ready for closing, moderators. I don't know how long we've been going.
Oh, just about
Like
45 minutes.
I think.
Well, I guess since you guys have come to a natural end,
There we go.
say that,
How about that?
we've come to the close of our debate. We'll let each debater make a short closing statement if they choose to, and then we'll move on to audience questions. Which, do we have any? I don't know yet. Well, since P Bar's open, we'll let Elijah close first. Elijah, want to make a closing statement?
Yep. I think the best solution to police brutality is to reduce certain laws and regulations that are within drugs and zoning, really. That can help out a lot. And I think expanding the market by allowing, by getting rid of certain laws like this and getting rid of the capital gains tax, reducing the income tax, reducing certain corporate income taxes is going to help out a lot with these communities maintaining more wealth or having the opportunity to get more wealth, and they don't have to turn to crime. I think that is my closing statement for now. That's it.
All righty, thank you.
Awesome,
Elijah.
thanks, Reeves, and look, thanks for a spirited discussion. Oh, sorry.
All right, thank you, Elijah. And P. Barnes, if you'd like to make a closing statement, go ahead.
Yep, we're good.
Yeah, sure. Look, I'm surprised. I think we agreed on more than I expected, and thanks, Reeves, for having a respectful discussion on it. I